It is going.
So,
Sorry.
so after a very brief absence, we are back,
Yep.
continuing our way through season XV. And this season, we are revisiting each year of the 90s. We're watching one movie a week, but two movies from each year. That'll make more sense later. Or need no more explanation if you've been listening along. But then we're going through and doing some rankings and talking about how the different years of the 90s stack up to each other as far as their contribution towards horror. And the motivation behind all this is that if you do a lot of reading about horror movie history, the 90s tend to be pretty maligned as a time of cheap cash grab direct to VHS sequels and remakes. And I think the 90s have more to offer than that. And so that's why we're doing this deep dive this season.
I'm with you 100%. I think that we should go back to VHSs. That's all I got.
Cool. Yeah, and we found some movies that would have been great to own on VHS so far this
Agreed.
season,
Yeah,
which was
some
kind
really
of the
good ones.
point. We've found some real duds too, but some good ones as well.
We're also kind of here for that a little bit, you know? Like,
I
it
mean,
adds
it's,
a little
it's
bit of
more fun.
spice.
It's more fun when we can dunk on a movie, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so this week we did one. This is our second week of doing movies from 1997.
hmm
And we did the movie Funny Games, which might be confusing because the very first episode of this podcast, way back like 135,000 years ago,
hmm
was on the movie Funny Games, but it was actually about the remake. So now we're going back and doing the original of a movie that we had only reviewed the remake. And I'm excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah. It's, in fact, if you guys got fooled by that, you're not alone. I was like questioning Daniel about it last week. I was like, what? Or I guess 2 weeks ago. I was like, what? We already did. Anyways, this movie also like influenced a ton of like movies since then,
Yeah,
even past the sequel. So I think I think it was a good pick because of that alone. Some of my favorite horror films are, has to be influenced by this without a doubt. I'll go to my grave on that.
definitely. Yeah. And we will come back at the end of this episode and see where 1997 ranks amongst the other years from the 90s for their horror movie contributions. And it's looking pretty damn strong. So 97 is going to be one to watch as we enter the final weeks of this bracket.
We also call the year 1997 the year of the mistakes. Uh, both of our younger siblings were born in 1997, and there's a big age gap if y'all catch our drift. It's not a mistake. I love them both.
Yeah, they're both, the world is better off with both of them in it. So
Now,
yeah.
back
Well, yeah, at the
then,
time it was a disruption. Yeah, sure. But
yeah, I like
yeah,
them now.
I do too. So yeah, with that, we will. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we can get into the Europeans used to fight world wars, and now they don't know the difference between a rifle and a shotgun. Details.
Yes, yes, Daniel.
I'm back.
I love it. That was amazing.
In 1997, Austrian psychological horror film Funny Games made its appearance at the Cannes Film Festival. This movie was written and directed by Michael Haneke, and it tells the story of a family who are taken captive in their home by two psychotic young men who torture them seemingly for no reason other than the entertainment value. I couldn't find any budget or box office info on this one, so you can guess that they were both pretty low, but this movie can currently be streamed on Max. That's all I got.
I like it. Listen, been looking forward to doing this episode for a while now. Not for many reasons. We just hadn't done an episode for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Same. Well, so last week when we did our episode on Event Horizon, we talked about how we'd kind of been getting into the big budget, ambitious CG era of movies. And then this week, Funny Games comes along and goes just 1000% in the opposite direction. But as you said, this has ended up being a super influential movie in horror. And I had in my notes in all caps, this is how you do home invasion horror.
Yes. Yeah.
I think if you go back to a bunch of movies that we've done already, like The Strangers and Hush and When a Stranger Calls, and basically anything that is sort of in that home invasion genre, this one stands out among them as doing all the things that are effective and really kind of setting the stage of like showing off what this subgenre can be. And obviously this one wasn't, the first to do it, but I feel like this one was a really pivotal movie for that particular subgenre. So it was a really good one to include this season.
Yeah, like this movie, what I feel like the people who made this movie like set out to make one specifics. They knew what they were going to make as far as like the style being home invade, and that's all this was. Like there wasn't a ton of fluff in the middle of it. There were some cool like scenes that they did with some shots, but like you cut this down, you break this down, it's like this is a very well made home invasion horror movie. On top of the horror, the home invasion piece, the real horror aspect is the doing it, the why not reason. Like, why are you doing this? Why not? Which is from Strangers,
Yes.
um, but like that,
Because you
that's
were home.
yeah, because you're home. That's that's like one of the most terrifying pieces of it because there are actual people like that in this world, and like the difference is I mean, they just it's if this was a mathematical equation, they just got everything right to get the final product. They didn't make. I mean, the kids were creepy, but not like if you just walk past them like and they were dressed the way they were, you think these are probably some white collar kids going to the golf course or whatever.
Right.
Is that what it is? Golf course? I don't know what those nerds play, but talking about those killers, not actual golfers and golfers, but it was just the mathematical equation was just like you have a home invasion happening, you have family that's just there for a good time, you have this weird kids all of a sudden, and it just builds into this and develops. But what you realize is like we wouldn't have Hush without this like whatsoever. Like there's nothing can convince me otherwise. Like Funny Games is the original king of home invasion for no reason whatsoever. And Hush was the exact same way. Strangers, obviously, but it it felt good watching it. However, I'd like to also say one more thing about this. I'll probably say a few more because we're only a few minutes into this episode.
I am counting on you saying more things.
Nope. No, the watching it back when we first did this, which I think was 2017, the remake, which is I think like a shot for shot almost. uh it's amazing what like owning your own house and like having wife and kid will do. So this was we recorded our first episode before I was married, obviously before we bought our house, before my kid, and now I have all this, and I gotta tell you, man, it
Hit a
it
little different.
it well, and what the listeners don't know is like we were supposed to go, like we rented out a lake house between our house, like where we live, so that we could get together, play music, re-record some music, write some new, and just get away. And like we had just watched it, like like the episode we were going to
Yeah.
record was like
Right.
right before this, and I was like, all I could think about was us going there, and then my thought was like, "Oh, this is on Texas side, so we might have to have Daniel bring a gun, like because there was not going to
Right.
not be a
Yeah.
gun with it, because
Yeah.
I'm not farting around, But anyway, it it still messed with me, like that, just like going to the cabin, but like having family, man. I mean, it's not like it'd be any different for you, and taking, Sarah to do something like that, but still, it's just like, phew.
Yeah.
I was like physically like cringing at multiple times throughout this movie.
Yeah, this movie really didn't pull its punches whatsoever, and it was very in your face with the violence and the brutality and just kind of the psychological torture as well.
Mhm.
And so it was set up very much to make you feel empathy for the family who were being, the targets. And I think it was effective in that. And I wanted to go back. So I mentioned how, last week we were talking about us being in the big budget, ambitious CG era of movies.
Yeah.
This one went totally the opposite direction. But there's something that you've mentioned several times when we've talked about home invasion horror that you were also getting into just now. That is the thing that makes it scary for you is that it feels so possible
Mhm.
and real. And like you can't like you can convince yourself that a giant shark isn't going to attack you. You can convince yourself that like aliens don't exist. You can convince yourself that there's no such thing as ghosts. But you really can't convince yourself that a crazy person couldn't come into your house and break through a window or kick in the door or charm their way in and then have a weapon and
Right.
do something similar to what's happening in this movie, right? And so I think that one of the reasons this one was so effective was because it just used real basic filming and special effects and everything else. Like there was nothing over the top, there was nothing beyond belief, there was nothing that really looked all that fake. And I think that it's sticking to the real kind of gritty realistic presentation of the movie was a very large percentage of why it was so effective.
Right. Yeah. For the musicians out there, it's like you could write a rock song that has keys and it has keyboards and it has just a thousand different instruments, and yeah, that could sound really good. But also, if you just have a four-piece band, two guitars, say, sings and bass, and it's just down, it's stripped down like that's, in my opinion, it can be more powerful because like you're getting all this
Mhm.
power from just this, and you don't have to add all these pieces to it. And this is a prime example. Like now, when it's done right, it's a good show, if it's done right. But there's a lot more pieces that can be messed up if you have a full production with a bunch of CGI
Yeah.
and all this. There's so much going on. But with this, they were just like, this is what we're setting out to make. And I don't know if they said this, but just the final product's the answer, I guess. But and this is how gritty it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do to mess with the viewers a little bit during the film, and this is what we're going to, this is the style, and it's very crisp, and just clear cut. And yeah, it was almost like a stripped down version of a horror film. And it's a, I don't know if it's cliche or not, but like less is more, and this is a prime example. If they started doing a
Yeah.
bunch of CGI and stuff with it, I would have been lost right away.
It was like it was stripped down to only the elements that work.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was just very effective from start to finish, which is cool.
Yeah.
And I also think that everybody involved with making this movie, making creative decisions about it, were definitely students of horror.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's funny to me that we started with this one because there were so many things in it that go back to like conversations we've had over the years since then.
Mhm.
So even from like the intro where we talk about like the most stereotypical horror movie opening is the overhead shot of a car driving deep into the woods away from society.
Mhm.
Like that's just such. I can't imagine if we went back and counted like the number of movies we've watched that started that way.
Oh, yeah.
And in this one, it was like the classical music instead of like kind of the creepy, ominous stuff you would expect.
Yep.
But then there's like that heavy metal that started really abruptly and it says funny games big across the screen. And it's just like, okay, cool, like buckle up because this is, sort of a classic horror movie, but it's going to mess with you in some very unexpected ways.
Yeah, that told me that, no, I mean, especially since we had already seen the remake. I mean, we knew what we
Hmm.
were getting ourselves into, but that told me like that was their warning of like this isn't gonna be exact. Just when you think that you got this piece, it's gonna be
Yes.
something totally different. And that's, the classical music was what makes you comfortable, gets you engaged,
Hmm.
and then the hard rock was just like, but you're about to be screwed over a thousand times. Like there's intense stuff is coming.
Yeah. And you said, since we've done it before, we knew what we were getting into. I got so sad when I saw the dog for the first time.
Dude, I
I
forgot
was
about
just
the.
like,
I forgot.
man.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
again, another thing that happens in all the horror movies,
yeah,
dogs always die, and
yeah.
it hurts me every time.
A lot
So,
of it was like cleaning up the pieces of why so and so wouldn't, or why something try trying to clean up, like, well, why didn't they just do this, why didn't they do that, or the
yeah,
dog is usually the protector. If it's not going to be killed, it's usually the protector.
yeah.
Rarely do they go, like, just away and then they come back at the end.
Well,
uh,
sometimes the kid sidekick has to ride his
I was
bike
gonna
for a
say,
really long time to go let him out, and then
yeah, this is Rumpelstiltskin. Oh
yeah,
wait, no, it wasn't that one, was it?
it was
Bad Moon.
Bad Moon. Yeah,
Yeah, Bad Moon. But anyway, so it's like they cleaned up a lot of this. But God, I saw that dog. I was just like, oh, bud, you're dead. Oh,
yeah,
you're a goner.
yeah. And I was a little worried too if coming back to this one after I knew the story, because like you said, the remake is like almost a shot for shot remake.
Hmm.
So it's like basically we've seen this movie already, and with it being so psychological, I was curious if it was still going to hit the same. And there was that one like pause in the middle that felt long, and the other one that also felt long in this one.
Hmm.
But there were also things that I think I appreciated more this time around.
Hmm.
So like when the friends stopped by on their sailboat towards the beginning, and I think Peter, I think was his name, or
Yeah,
Paul,
Paul.
maybe Paul, um, like just
Oh,
interrupts him and says,
yeah,
"Where's your dock?" And then he knows the exact house. You're like, oh,
yeah,
even this early on, he's already planning his next victim. Like he's not even done killing these people yet, but it's such a foregone conclusion to him that he's already just thinking about his next move, and it's just going to continue. And the sinking feeling I got when he, knew the exact house, it was just like, oh man, I wouldn't have appreciated that as much the first time around.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think maybe would even, like, you wouldn't even, I guess, put two and two together originally. But yeah, definitely, you're just like, oh, you're a goner, and then you think like everyone's a goner, like everyone that lives on this street,
Yeah,
this neighborhood, they have to be a goner. You would think these kids, Peter and Paul, would have got caught though.
yeah, one would think.
Someone's got to make a mistake. That's when Dexter shows up.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'll just tell
There
you though, like, in we are a lot older now, so I'm way more mature. I'm just saying, I would have just thrown Paul, the one with the eggs. I think his name is Paul. I would just thrown him out
mhm.
immediately,
Yeah.
just for standing close to me.
Yep.
There's certain things I like and I don't
No, I
like.
don't abide, especially in my own home.
Yeah, no way. Like, and not even coming into my house.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta be someone I know to come in, and it's not because of these movies. It's just, it's my house, my rules.
Yeah.
You don't like it, I won't come into your house. But like, those were the pieces I caught myself kind of like just getting irritable about, because, but it's probably by design, because you know part of you is like, you guys don't have to be so polite. Don't have to be so polite. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to say, "Sir, can you leave?" You could just say, "Get the fuck out of my house, or I'm gonna stab you in your face."
Well, and that's part of what makes it scary, though, is just because the family was very well meaning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Stop.
And but how many people could see themselves
I
in that
know.
same situation, right? Like
Yeah.
your default is just to be like accommodating,
Yeah.
and then somebody can totally exploit that. And
Mhm.
now it's like, should I even talk to strangers?
That's why I don't.
Yeah.
Look at me, man. I'm the happiest I've ever been.
One scene or one part that I liked was when they were talking about he uh, Peter was talking to them, and he's like, "You bet you'll be alive at 9 a.m. and we bet
Yeah.
you'll be dead, okay?" And then he just turns to the camera and says, "You're on their side, aren't you?
Yep.
Do you want to bet?"
Yeah.
and and it was just like all of a sudden it was like scary to me because I was like, he knows I'm watching, like just
Right.
the because it's such a tense environment and everything that it was
Yeah.
just a really really like it felt gross to be pulled into it that way.
Yeah. You were part of it now that the fourth wall has been broke. But
Yeah.
also, like, I wanted to answer yes in Oklahoman, meaning, like, you bet. Yeah, dude. Yeah. Make me part of this, my man.
Yeah.
show up. I'll just call my dad. He come over ready for it. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, the fourth wall. I mean, like even the rewinding, you know,
Hmm.
scene partially through, like, man, that messed with me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and that, like I said, there's the one scene towards the middle that was felt really long, just like it did last time. And
Hmm.
so, like, it had been a full 25 minutes of movie time since the bad guys left, which in movie time, while you're sitting there watching, is an eternity. Like,
Uh-huh.
out of an hour and a half movie, that's, like 30% of the time. Um, and it had been so slow, and there was just nothing happening. There's barely any sound. The husband has given up on the phone and goes into the living room to put a blanket over the son's body, and he's like processing his feelings, and you're just like, man, this has been the craziest movie. Like, where could it possibly go next? And then he turns around and a golf ball just rolls down the hallway.
Hmm.
Like, that was like 25 minutes of setup for a sinking feeling deep in your stomach. That
Right.
was wildly effective.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're just like, okay, like, we're done. Like, nothing good is going to happen. This movie will not let up. There will not be a happy ending.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, first time watchers, or like even watch this in the theater, like that would have to be the dread that come.
Hmm.
It's the same. It's it's just another way of like getting you pulled in, kind of like with breaking the fourth wall kind of thing in the scene that you were just speaking about before.
Hmm.
Like, it just brings you right in, because like not only do you know that they have to lose hope with that, but like as a viewer, I did. I was just like, oh yeah, they're gone.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
not
and it seemed
pretty.
like they kept finding ways to still mess with you. So, like, to like give you a little bit of hope. So, like, that was
Yeah.
one thing where the killers just left and they'd been gone so long that you couldn't imagine they'd come back. But then there was the scene where I guess Paul was messing with the wife, and then she grabs the shotgun and shoots Peter.
Hmm.
And you're like, oh my gosh, like they finally got rid of one of them. Like, there is some hope. Maybe we can get there. And then Paul just picks up the TV remote and rewinds the scene,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
prevents her from getting the gun. And then he shoots George instead.
Yep.
And that's like, that's interesting to me because it was done very explicitly to mess with you as the viewer, not to torture the characters that they were torturing. Because the
Right.
characters in the past don't know that that could have happened, right?
Hmm.
It's 100% just messing with you as the viewer, which I felt like was a really creative way of doing that from a relatively low budget movie. Like, I
Yeah.
thought that was just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the bare bones method. Like, you don't have to have a ton of CGI, like, to like get the viewers involved, and doing the stuff that they did, as far as like talking to the camera, rewinding, things like that. I mean, I think it's the same. I think it's partially on the same level as, like, with slashers, when you're in the view of the killer, like the killer walking through the house and you hear him breathing, and it looks like you're looking through the mask, like putting your eyes through their, putting you in their shoes. And it's like the similar thing, because it puts you in the movie at that point, even though it's on the
Yeah,
villain side. Like, this is just putting you in the movie, like you're almost like you're watching a home recording or something, or you're watching it with
yeah, right.
Peter or Paul, and they did that, like you said, on a small budget, like just bare bones style, and somehow it just worked. Like, I think it was perfect timing for when they did that within the movie, as far as, I think, because the first time he looked at the camera, it was just like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I forgot all about that piece, and then um, and you're like, oh yeah, this messes with us too. Like, that's what made me realize it. And I think it was like early on. I don't remember which scene, but anyway, early on, I was just like, oh yeah, they mess with us in this too. It's not just the dog
yeah.
dying that's gonna hurt my heart.
Right, yeah. Also, it seemed like a lot of the most explicit violence took place off camera.
Yeah,
And I get why they do that, but it was also a little bit confusing at some parts. But I think that goes back to what you were saying about where, trying to do a special effect that you can't pull off is distracting and can pull you out of the moment. So leaving it more to your imagination, I think in this case was more effective than it would have been if they were trying to be more explicit about it.
Yeah, I think it could be that, and it could also just be the fact of like, if we put if we put some of this stuff in there, like we're not gonna get a rating. Like we're gonna be
Right? Yeah,
screwed,
fair. Yeah,
like so we gotta. But but yeah, I agree. I think, and we learned that with when we did like the 100 Years of Horror, like some of those earlier horror films, they did it with shadows or like a way, and
yeah,
it still worked, So that tells us, like you were saying at the very beginning, like it has to be made by like fans of horror, and it's like, yeah, they did the research.
yeah,
This podcast wasn't out in 1997, so they didn't listen to our 100 Years of Horror to learn that. But
yeah.
just saying, they did their math.
Uh, Again, students of the game like
Yeah.
clearly understand the horror genre and how to kind of borrow from things that have been effective over time and working within their budgetary and technology constraints and just delivering exactly the type of movie they wanted to make, which
Yeah.
is cool.
Yeah.
That
Oof.
song that got played over and over, that was like the metal song,
Mhm.
was by a band called Naked City, and the song was Bonehead. And
Oh.
it reminded me a little of the band that we've talked about before, the number 12 Looks Like You, which is named after a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
And check out the song Don't Get Blood on My Prada Shoes and tell me that couldn't have been on this soundtrack.
I'm on it.
So, anyway, just a little music digression. But yeah, we still got some rankings to do. Do you want to get into that now, or did you have other stuff on the movie?
Let me think. No, I guess it's more so just word of advice. If you're ever in this situation that this family was in, and you're thinking like, there's a chance we're probably not going to get out of it, I say just go balls to the wall trying to kill them as much. Like if you think you're going to be
Yeah,
killed anyways, just go for it. Start biting fingers off, biting ear, go anything you do, bite off. I'm
yeah,
just saying, because at the end of the day, I would rather go out swinging than like just sitting there stressing about like, oh, I'm probably
hmm,
gonna die anyways. And
yeah,
that's the anxiety that I had throughout this whole thing, because it's like, God, I just want to fight for you guys. Like, if we're all gonna die here, let's just die together. But um, I don't know. I guess maybe it's also the mantra of like, I'm gonna take one of you bastards with me.
yeah,
Doesn't matter who. I'm taking one of y'all with me. But that's it. That's all I got. It was just as terrifying, one of the more terrifying movies for me, in my opinion. Uh, yeah, talk about textbook. Like what scares the shit out of Bryce. This is it.
yeah. And this one, I think you should just definitely include in like any, like if I was teaching a college course on horror movies, this is probably the movie I'd pick for home invasion horror
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
subgenre.
for sure.
So yeah.
And really
So
big
yeah,
people with small hands freak me out. But that's, go on. Sorry.
the wife in this one looked like a character from the show Doug.
She did. Yes, sir.
If we're gonna get into
I
proportions,
love it. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, very 90s
Yeah,
on brand.
that's great.
Uh, so yeah, each or I guess every other week, as we have completed a year of the 90s that we're revisiting, we go back and do some rankings. And so the rules for the rankings are that we do the two movies that we watched as part of this season, and then we can also include any movies that were from that year that we previously reviewed. So, like this week, we're wrapping up 1997, and we did Event Horizon and Funny Games. So, those are competitors for 97. But we've previously done Anaconda and I Know What You Did Last Summer. So for 1997, the set of movies that we're using for the rankings are Anaconda, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Event Horizon, and Funny Games. I personally think that's a pretty strong showing. And so where we had landed previously was that the number one ranked year was 1991 with People Under the Stairs, Silence of the Lambs, Dead Space, and Ernest Scared Stupid.
Fuck me.
In number 2 was Bad Moon, Pinocchio, From Dusk Till Dawn, Scream, and Mars Attacks. To me, those are pretty close to dead even. I feel like Pinocchio dragged 96 down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But, Silence of the Lambs is pretty hard to argue with too. So, yeah. But this one, I feel like kind of belongs in that same conversation because in 1990, which is currently in third place, we had It, Jacob's Ladder, and Arachnophobia. I think that this should be ranked above that. Do you feel the same?
I do.
Okay.
My
So
my
real
struggle
go
is
ahead.
is this number one or number two for me?
Yeah. I feel very similarly. Now, I don't think I Know What You Did Last Summer was a great movie, but it was like influential and it was kind of like quintessential teen horror. It was like almost becoming the thing that Psycho was making fun of, but with some interesting twists. But Anaconda was great and a lot of fun. Event Horizon blew me away. Loved it. Funny Games, I think, is as good or better than just about anything else in these lists. So I think I would put 97 above 91 just because
Yeah.
there's no like dead space in 97. You know what I mean?
So yes, and I will. And the reason why I think I held on to 91 is strictly Ernest Scared Stupid.
Yeah.
However, if I'm picking out, no, I do love People Under Stairs. Is People Under Stairs considered a child's or like a early teen horror?
What was it rated?
I don't know, but so my reason why I was at because I was thinking like I'm holding on to this for Ernest Scared Stupid and People Under the Stairs. I have a special part in my heart for both of those for two different reasons. Uh, but 90s, like I do no, that's if we're talking horror and not like what did Bryce like when he was younger. It's 97. I'd
People
like
Under
to
the
know what you did.
Stairs.
I personally like to know what you did last summer. I liked Anaconda. I even like Scream 2 that we didn't do, American Werewolf in Paris, Funny Games, Spawn, Event Horizon. I don't remember Cube because I was super drunk when I watched it, but um, it just has like there's too many good ones in that list for me.
I think 97 is our new number one.
97 then 1991.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
congratulate.
exciting.
And then 90. I think everything stays the same after that. It's
Yeah.
just everything got moved down a peg.
Yep. Makes it easy.
Yeah,
And again, we'll come back and review all these at the very end
that's
and
true.
kind of, have a chance to renegotiate sort of in the larger context. But I think for now, I feel really good about 97 being the best year of the 90s for horror so far.
Yeah, and one thing which I'm just bringing this up to you right now, maybe one thing we could do is if we had an MVP of the season for each of us.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we'll add that to when we do the final
Yeah,
ranking. But 97, man, this was a good year. This was a
it
good
was.
year.
Yeah. So yeah, we will be back next week with our first movie for 1998, and I'm excited to talk. I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Me as well. Would it be me too? Me too. I
And
am as
also
well.
me too as well.
Also, I'd like to say I'm in. No, I just ruined it. Fuck.
Dear Maria, count me in. Or a McLovin, I'm in.
Yeah. Oh, that's